Lisa, welcome to the program. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks, Melanie. Appreciate it. So, let's get started then. Do you have the first slide up there?
I have the clinical applications of craniosacral therapy, yes.
Okay. Can you go to the first one, Andrew Taylor Still?
Got it.
Okay, thank you. Just very briefly, we're going to start here. Andrew Still, who is considered the father of osteopathy. And I always love coming back to beginning with him because of his 4 key concepts there, as you can read. And those first 3 are very important into what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Particularly the second one, where structure and function are interrelated. And being a chiropractor, of course, that's something that I'm very interested in. But hopefully, by the end of this, when we take a look at the fascial and the craniosacral system, it'll mean a little bit more. The body is a unit, as we all know. We are connected head to toe with our fascia as body workers. We know about the fascia. We just have hollowed out areas for where our organs and all our things that we have that need to be, but we are just one big unit, one big connective piece of connective tissue. And of course, the body is a self-correcting mechanism, as we know. So if we go to the next slide, where we see John Upledger, John got very interested in craniosacral therapy or in cranial bones and working with them when he first was in a surgery. It was a surgery many years ago that he saw the movement of the craniosacral system at the time, which he did not know. He had a patient that he had to hold the dural membrane where the neurosurgeon was scraping off a plaque. Calcium plaque that was on the outside of the dura, and then during the surgery, John had to hold the dural membrane, and he had to hold it still so the neurosurgeon could scrape it off, because he certainly didn't want to nick the dura. And John couldn't hold it still. And what he noticed is that it was independent of the cardiovascular, of the pulse, and independent of the breathing. And he just wondered what this was. And he had many years ago in osteopathic school, he had taken a cranial class. He wasn't very impressed with it at the time, but when he had this experience, he really wondered if what he was feeling in that cranial class, if this was it. So he became very interested in this, and he eventually ended up, as you see, as a researcher at Michigan State University and a professor of biomechanics. And he had various different kinds of research projects going on, and they all ended up kind of showing him a different piece and understanding about the meningeal system and the craniosacral system. And as you see there, one of the experiments that he did is he took radio antennae and he put them in the parietal sutures of a monkey, and then he broadcast a radio signal between them, and the radio signal would change. That was one of the ways to show that, yes, these cranial bones really are moving. And then he went down and he played with the coccyx, and he showed again that it changed the radio waves. So for him, the thought of that cranial bones don't move and that they're fused became, a moot point at that time. So he did, as I said, he did quite a bit of research and looking at skulls and at craniums and looking at the fascial system within the cranium. And one of the things that he found in his dissections is that he had dissections of monkeys. He also had human dissection too. And one of the things he found was that there was a nerve nervosa or cells, different nerve cells through the fascia, through the falx cerebri, going down into the third ventricle. And the ventricular system of the brain, of course, is where the cerebral spinal fluid is made. And he took a look at that, and he wondered why that was there and what that was about. So one of the things he did is he had a good buddy who was a neurosurgeon, and he asked him that when he was in surgery, if he would please take a little slice of the suture, because he wanted to see what was there, what it looked like. And he wanted, of course, a live specimen. He didn't want it preserved because it changes everything. And so he did. His friend sent him live specimens, and at the time John was also working with a neurophysiologist and histologist, and they did some histological studies on the specimens of the suture, and what they found was that the suture contained nerve fibers and blood vessels and collagen fibers, elastic fibers, stretch receptors, and pressure receptors.